Alright, welcome to the Bruce channel. I'm Bruce and it's been a very busy week. And it's a week made shorter by some things. And for that reason we won't have as many topics today as we might otherwise. One other note, I'll be doing some film work this week. That's why this, more on that next week. So, I experienced something new this week. It wasn't momentous and probably not even unprecedented. But the setup, it rained pretty much all week, not non-stop, but every day, showery, sometimes thunderstorms, and this was going on through Thursday. Well, on Wednesday, I was making preparations for a trip I thought I'd be making. I was doing some laundry, I was getting some mail, and doing the newspaper stop, and different things. And I checked the radar. It didn't look terribly ominous, but there was some bright orange stuff and some boxes, so I turned on the television, and nothing but weather people, just weather people, wall-to-wall weather people, all the local affiliates anyway, which is ominous because, you know, the FCC, the rules require that if there's a tornado warning in effect anywhere in the station's area, they have to cover that, and that's the thing. Anywhere in the area is a vague term. What it essentially means is the counties that watch this station, whatever that station will be, and it varies from place to place. You know, the Carolinas, there's the Triad, which is Raleigh and Durham, and the Triad is Greensboro and High Point, and the Triangle is Raleigh and Durham, and then there's Fayetteville, and there's Charlotte, and there's the Outer Banks, and there's all these different places. And they could be hours away, but still watching the same channel. So, you know, if you're watching the game or your favorite program, and it's sunny, an hour and a half away, there might be something bad going on, so they cut away. And that's happened to me once. I was watching NCAA basketball, and there were some warnings. Anyway, they have to cut away. That's FCC rules, and certainly I've experienced that before. But what I never experienced, they'd mentioned a couple of times that, you know, they had cut in at 3:40. I was later than that, but we've been on the air now since like 3:40. And so it comes to 5 o'clock, they hand it off to the news anchors, but they don't have any news other than there's some reports of damage, there's some reports of this, we'll give it back to the meteorologists, and of course they're watching the radar and saying it's going into this neighborhood, back and forth. The news anchors, the meteorologists, the news anchors, the meteorologists, back and forth, that's all it was on. Sometimes they tell you, okay, if you're in this community, get down to a basement, get down right now. They'd say, you still have like 10 minutes to go. They were watching the hook echoes, and what was unprecedented was there was never any news other than the weather, news anchor, meteorologist, and no commercials this entire time. So it weakened just enough, went up into Virginia, and it just happened to coincide with the national news at 6:30. They seamlessly handed it off, but I've never seen that. No commercials, no news, just weather. And there was some damage. The gym at I used to be an announcer. Elementary school was completely destroyed. There were lots of trees down, not near me necessarily, but most of this car was destroyed. A huge tree fell on it, and making it worse, there were a couple of people in the car. Yet through all of this, amazingly, no injuries. Even the guys in that car, yeah, it was crushed just behind where they were. You know, sometimes you just have to be lucky, I guess. And those weren't near me, but 7 years ago, I was watching the basketball, as I said, and they cut away. Well, probably not a quarter mile away from me. It destroyed a daycare center and flipped a bus. It was a Sunday night, so, you know, daycare center, nobody there, nobody in the school bus. Again, sometimes you just have to be lucky. All right, I'm not going to dwell on it, but I mentioned last week that I thought trying to stop the FBI investigation wasn't a good idea. Donald Trump reportedly still thinks highly of Lieutenant General, U.S. Army retired, Mike Flynn. I don't know why he does. Flynn apparently lied to him and reportedly lied to Mike Pence too. There was certainly some irony this week. And then we all heard this, or a variation of this, many times.
Like you see on the mob, right? You see the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
And that, on the surface, sounds perfectly true, doesn't it? But did you know that in 1990, he himself, Donald Trump, took the Fifth Amendment 97 times? It was part of the divorce deposition. What would be self-incriminating in a divorce case? I have no idea. But nevertheless, Mike Flynn took the Fifth Amendment. Yeah. He doesn't want to hand over his papers to the Senate committee that is investigating things. So I just wonder, is Donald Trump still asking that question? Actually, that's a question on the surface that does seem to be correct. And I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know a lot, but I do know this teeny amount. I know this. Someone I know very well was being investigated. The evidence was completely circumstantial, and the person was also innocent. And as I said, I know the person, but consulting with a lawyer seemed like a good idea, so this person did that. The lawyer demanded to hear the entire story and then agreed to represent him. The person's inclination was to tell the entire story the same way, certain that the innocence would be proven. But the lawyer's condition was simple. No matter what you are asked, you take the Fifth Amendment. Otherwise, get yourself another lawyer. So yeah, the question seems spot on. But you know, the founders had concerns. Throughout history, governments have gained confessions through coercion. So the framers of the Constitution built in this thing, if you say Fifth Amendment, they can't make you confess. And that's true. Mostly, except when they can. If you're offered immunity from prosecution, then that protection goes away. Now, they still can't make you confess. They don't use, thumb hooks. But if you refuse, that's contempt of court. It gets complicated. Oh, and my latest understanding is that the Senate committee may instead subpoena Flynn's business records because a business isn't a citizen, and thus doesn't enjoy Fifth Amendment protections. It gets complicated. Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. Or wait, I can let others do it. All right, welcome back. Remember, you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com, and you can watch all of our previous shows, most of them anyway, at either our Facebook page, The Bruce Channel, or at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel. All right. I was having a conversation roughly 2 weeks ago, and I said that this is one of those times that Memorial Day falls on the right day, and actually I was wrong when I said it. What let me down, the wrong conclusion, was that I confused and conflated two different facts. The first, Memorial Day first became the last Monday in May in 1971. Before that it was May 30th, whatever the day of the week it was. So while it was the 30th, that particular day would also have been the 5th day of the week, that day of the month rather, the 5th Tuesday of May, or the 5th Friday of May, and so on. Well, this time, rather than being on, say, the 26th, which would only be the 4th, it is on the 29th, which is the 5th Monday in May. And that's where I got a little bit confused. Of course, Memorial Day is often considered the unofficial start to summer, so sure, there will be lots of cookouts and parades. It began as a rather modest event, some women laying flowers at the graves of Civil War dead. That is, they were decorating the graves, and it was for years known as Decoration Day. But then after World War I, now we got lots more dead soldiers, so they started calling it Memorial Day in memoriam of all the soldiers who had died. And then, of course, since then we've had World War II, and the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, and some Gulf Wars, and a Panama excursion, and a Grenada excursion, and another excursion into Beirut, and another one into Mogadishu, and I'm probably forgetting a few others, but the point is there's lots of dead soldiers for whom we can pause in memoriam. You know, when I first came to North Carolina, lots of places in the South still didn't observe it because it began as a northern holiday. You know, when I was here, yeah, the banks were closed, the post office were closed, but the kids went to school. Now it's pretty uniformly observed, but I have just a little bit of a gripe, not a big one, but lately it seems as Memorial Day has become much more a Veterans Day. If you wore a uniform, you get all the accolades and the parades, and you get free admission to some things, and that's fine. Honoring veterans is fine, but if you honor everyone who wore the uniform, then you are conflating it with those who gave the full measure of devotion, and doesn't that cheapen their sacrifice just a little bit? I mean, they should not be equal. Yeah, I know, in November, the weather isn't so good for cookouts, and we could move it. I just think we might consider it less of a party, just a little bit, you know? All right, there was actually another reason for confusing the issue of May 29th, or at least for considering May 29th in this year, 2017, because on the 29th of May in 1917, well, you know, all around the world, doubtless lots of babies were born, but none of them had as much impact on the world as the one I'm speaking of. And that, of course, is John Fitzgerald Kennedy, whose centenary is Memorial Day, just by coincidence. Probably no one except Lincoln has had more words written about him, certainly no other American besides Lincoln. And you probably know the famous list of coincidences that link the two. The list is really overblown, and some of them aren't even true. I'm not going there. To try and describe John F. Kennedy in few words is mostly impossible, because he was almost every adjective you can think of at one time or another. He certainly was a study in contrasts. He was one of the most intelligent presidents we've had, but he coasted and joked his way through school in different grades and was almost expelled even. His older brother Joe got the good grades. His older brother Joe also was a better athlete, and everybody in that family had to be athletic. All right. Despite the appearance of always being in robust health, he was in poor health virtually all of his life, nearly dying several times as a child, several times as an adult. Now, he and his gorgeous wife and their two beautiful children were the perfect American family. Except they weren't. He was a philanderer always, and it's been reported that she had affairs of her own. You may know that he served in the Navy. Inasmuch as his father was ambassador to Great Britain in the days leading up to World War II, his father had some influence and used it to keep his son in naval intelligence, a desk job in Washington. But Jack Kennedy hated that, and he finally got himself into action, serving as a skipper of a PT, famously PT-109, skipper of a PT boat in the Solomon Islands. His boat got rammed, it sank. The true story then is actually too strange to be believable, except it is true. He led the crew swimming to an island, swimming for hours, dragging behind him a crewman who was so badly burned he couldn't swim. They swam for hours, and at night, probably the first time in his life, he applied himself for anything. Well, not anything. He applied himself when trying to score with a woman. But his presidency then, began with the Bay of Pigs disaster, April 1961. Except maybe it wasn't a disaster. This is my own thinking. But the plan, the invasion, was developed by the CIA under President Eisenhower, and everyone was in a snit because Fidel Castro, who along with his rebels ousted the Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, who was a dictator, a brutal dictator, but he let us do business there, so we liked him. During the years of fighting, Castro even raised money in the United States. He said for a long time he was not a communist, and then he said he was. And so the U.S. government couldn't let that stand, so we planned an invasion of Cuba. The invasion force was actually Cuban exiles who escaped when Castro took over, but they were trained and armed by the CIA and transported there in unmarked boats. And here's the thing. When they briefed the new president, Kennedy, he took their word for it that the plan would succeed. Never mind that in hindsight it really was impossible. They convinced themselves that it would work and that the invaders would then be joined by ordinary Cubans. And Kennedy thought, okay, these guys are the experts, they've got it planned. He did ask, what if they get in trouble? I will not authorize any of our forces, none, not planes, nothing. And this is the dirty secret. The planners knew they'd need the planes. The planners knew they'd need the planes. And they thought when it got down to it that Kennedy would then have to change his mind. He did not. No planes. So it was a terrific, terrific embarrassment. Catastrophic. That was April of 1961, as I said, just 3 months into his administration. So it was a catastrophe for the moment, but a year and a half later, October 1962, during the missile crisis, everybody wanted to invade Cuba. The Soviets had put missiles into Cuba, nuclear war-tipped missiles. They could have reached us. They weren't yet operational, but they were going to be pretty soon. And everybody, all of the military advisors and everybody, the CIA, especially Air Force General Curtis LeMay, he wanted to go in with an airstrike and take them all out. But Kennedy had learned from the experience that, sometimes the experts don't always know. He asked, could they guarantee they take out every last missile? No. Could he guarantee that they wouldn't harm any of the Soviets? No. Likely, if Richard Nixon had been elected when he first ran, had the situation been the same, he maybe would have listened to the experts. He also may have put in the planes at the original invasion and allowed the planes. Well, anyway, that is the indelible part of Jack Kennedy's legacy. President John F. Kennedy is not unlikely, yes or no. What would have happened in an alternate outcome can never be proven. It is only and can only be conjecture, always. That said, you can make an awfully compelling argument that we avoided the end of the world because he resisted the call for an invasion and found another way to get the missiles off the island. He was a smart man with towering weaknesses of the flesh. But in the final analysis, the man born 100 years ago, May 29th, likely saved us all. All right, 2 weeks ago, I told you about the circus coming to an end a week ago today. That was Sunday night. It might have been the very same show where I talked about Pearls Before Swine's author, Stefan Pastis, who typically works out like 6 or 8 months ahead of his deadline. But he proved that he can, when he wants to, work closer in than that. Take a look at his strip from Monday and Tuesday this week, the 2 days after the circus. All right, so have a good Memorial Day. Be safe. June starts on Thursday. June 1st is Say Something Nice Day, and I'm all in favor of that. And I hope that your upcoming week is the best one you've ever had.